Tonight, something is shifting across North America. A movement so large, so unnerving, that even seasoned analysts felt the ground tilt beneath them. It's not a policy change, not a scheduled event, and not a routine update buried deep inside government paperwork. Instead, it burst into the world through a single sentence. One line spoken into a microphone with full confidence and zero hesitation. A line that immediately sent tremors through markets, industries, and households on both sides of the border. When former U.S. President Donald Trump looked into the camera and declared that the Canada-USMCA agreement, CUSMA, was expiring next year, millions heard the message as a warning, a threat, and a promise of chaos. But here's the truth that makes this moment even more unsettling. The agreement is not expiring. Not next year, not even close. What Trump described as a dead end was nothing more than a routine review, yet the impact was anything but routine. Because when someone with Trump's influence claims the economic foundation of North America is collapsing, fear takes off faster than facts ever can. Investors pause, farmers panic, exporters freeze. Ordinary families brace for higher prices and fewer choices. You could practically feel the anxiety roll through supply chains like a pressure wave. And in moments like this, one thing matters more than anything else: leadership. Real leadership. You are watching Northern Pulse, and tonight we're going deeper into the story behind Trump's explosive claim, the truth that he failed to mention, and the steady, unshakable force that stepped in to calm the storm. It began with confidence. Too much confidence. Trump didn't hesitate, didn't clarify, didn't blink. When he stated that CUSMA would expire in a year, the delivery was sharp, direct, and unmistakably deliberate. There was no room for confusion, but there was plenty of room for damage. USMCA, the backbone of a continent's economic system, is not a contract on the brink of termination. What's approaching is a scheduled review, a chance for Canada, the United States, and Mexico to strengthen their partnership, update standards, and refine processes. But Trump's framing turned an administrative checkpoint into a doomsday announcement. Why does that matter? Because uncertainty is the silent enemy of prosperity. It halts investment, scares off expansion, and sends global markets into a defensive crouch. Companies planning to hire hesitate. Farmers planning to export stall. Businesses relying on predictable trade suddenly face a fog of unknowns. The immediate effect wasn't anger, it was confusion. A continent paused, trying to decode whether Trump knew something governments didn't, or whether this was another moment of performative dominance. And as the dust began to settle, something became clear. The claim wasn't just inaccurate, it was destabilizing. And that destabilization was only beginning. Inside Washington, far from cameras, the real reaction was frantic. Industry leaders, people who work with trade deals every day and understand their importance, started pushing back with urgency. Agriculture groups, produce associations, and manufacturing coalitions made their voices heard. They weren't whispering. They weren't suggesting. They were pleading. Trump's statement jeopardized the agreement that keeps food prices stable, prevents supply chain shocks, and protects American farmers from sudden market collapses. For many of these industries, even the suggestion that CUSMA is dying can trigger panic. In trade, perception becomes reality faster than policy ever can. Behind closed doors, officials were told the truth. Pulling out of or destabilizing CUSMA would devastate farmers, harm businesses, and disrupt a North American economy already stretched thin by global turbulence. Experts emphasized that continuity is not optional. It is essential. But while the professionals use data, Trump used drama, and drama wins headlines. His public statements contradicted everything being said privately in Washington. What business leaders tried to calm, he reignited. What experts attempted to clarify, he muddied. Canada watched closely because this wasn't an American issue alone. When a major U.S. industry trembles, Canada feels the shock immediately. And this shock was only building. As Trump delivered turbulence with every word, another figure stood in stark contrast. Mark Carney. His approach has never relied on volume, theatrics, or fear. He operates through precision, comprehension, and global awareness. Carney is not just any leader. He has governed two of the world's most influential central banks. He has navigated recessions, confronted global crises, and built frameworks that protected millions from financial collapse. His understanding of the world economy doesn't come from instinct or bravado. It comes from decades of experience. Where Trump tosses unpredictability like sparks onto dry grass, Carney extinguishes flames with clarity. He reinforces stability. He leans on strategy rather than spectacle. For Canadians watching Trump's outburst, Carney's steady presence acted like a counterweight, a reminder that leadership does not need to roar in order to be powerful. And as we move deeper into this story, the contrast between the two becomes even sharper. Trump escalates. Carney steadies. Trump excites chaos. Carney dissolves it. The question, then, is what happens when Trump takes his rhetoric beyond trade and directs it toward people themselves? After stirring economic panic, Trump shifted to a new target, the Somali community in Minnesota. The language he used wasn't heated, it was incendiary. He described their neighborhoods as disasters, claimed Somali immigrants destroyed the state, and singled out Congresswoman Ilhan Omar with personal attacks. These comments didn't land as political jabs. They landed as threats. Families who had lived in America for decades suddenly felt like outsiders in their own homes. Children asked their parents whether they would be removed from the country. Fear spread quickly, thick and destabilizing. But the facts didn't align with Trump's narrative. While he suggested Somali immigrants were behind a fraud scheme, the majority of individuals charged were American-born citizens. The alleged ringleader was a white man, yet facts were irrelevant in the face of fear-driven messaging. This pattern, create fear, create division, then present yourself as the solution, has always been a hallmark of Trump's political style. But for Canada, watching from across the border, this wasn't just an internal American moment. This was a warning of how the tone of leadership can shape society. And just as tensions were rising in the U.S., something far more dangerous was happening overseas in Europe. And Trump once again inserted himself into the narrative. While domestic turmoil brewed, Vladimir Putin hosted two unexpected guests in Moscow, Jared Kushner and real estate developer Steve Witkoff. Trump praised the meeting, calling it very good, but offered no explanation about the purpose of the conversation. The silence was louder than the announcement, because as this meeting unfolded, Russian forces escalated their assault on Ukraine. Cities were bombarded, escape routes were cut off. The conflict intensified with grim precision. At a moment when the world needed unity, Trump focused on praising a dictator without providing any clarity to the public. Canada, however, responded with action. Responsible leadership led to a pledge of $200 million to support Ukraine's defense. European nations prepared to use frozen Russian assets to aid Kyiv. These were not symbolic gestures. They were commitments grounded in values. Real leadership defends democracy. Real leadership stands with allies. Real leadership doesn't cozy up to authoritarian figures while their armies intensify violence. But as international tensions rose, something unexpected shifted the conversation back toward hope. An unlikely discovery that could change lives around the world. Amid political noise and global turbulence, science delivered a surprising breakthrough. Researchers studying over 200,000 health records found evidence that the shingles vaccine may slow the progression of dementia. It might reduce risk. It might extend clarity for aging populations. A quiet ray of hope pierced through an otherwise stormy week. Breakthroughs like this require strong public health systems, consistent funding, and leadership that values long-term well-being over immediate political gain. They require stability, something in short supply when misinformation spreads unchecked. Meanwhile, Canada was facing its own leadership challenges. Tim Hortons, a brand woven into Canada's cultural identity, pushed aggressively to expand its temporary foreign worker cap. First 10%, then 20%, then 30%. They argued they couldn't find enough staff. Critics raised alarms about exploitation risks. The situation demanded thoughtful leadership rooted in nuance, not slogans. Political instability surfaced again, this time in British Columbia. The BC Conservatives plunged into chaos when their leader, John Rustad, was declared professionally incapacitated. The announcement triggered a leadership crisis and exposed internal fractures. Each of these events highlighted a recurring truth. When leadership is weak or absent, instability follows. But while political confusion simmered, a bizarre and symbolic crisis emerged in Toronto, one that perfectly captured the idea of hidden danger. In downtown Toronto, firefighters confronted one of the strangest emergencies the city had ever seen. A narrow, 2-inch cavity between two buildings had filled with combustible materials. Somehow, it ignited. But the fire couldn't be reached. No tools could penetrate the tiny gap. Engineers couldn't map the exact fuel source. It smoldered, invisible yet persistent, a quiet blaze with the potential to erupt into something catastrophic. Firefighters monitored it, unable to extinguish it, racing against time as smoke rose through hidden channels. That fire became a metaphor for our moment, a hidden crisis lodged between political rhetoric and global instability, unseen yet threatening, always burning yet out of reach. A symbol of what happens when systems weaken, when facts become optional, and when uncertainty becomes the default state. But just as this strange event captured the fragility of the world, another moment, this time hopeful, emerged from Montreal, where resilience was quietly rewriting the rules of healing. In Montreal, stroke survivors gathered not for medical treatment, but for music. They joined a choir as part of a study exploring whether singing could repair damaged language pathways. And something remarkable happened. People who struggled to speak found rhythm. Words returned. Connections reformed. Voices found strength again. It was a reminder that even in chaotic times, human resilience can spark renewal. But while hope flourished in one part of the country, financial markets signaled trouble. The global AI boom, driven by enormous investments, skyrocketing valuations, and circular funding between tech giants, began showing signs of a bubble. Experts warned that if this bubble burst, the damage could ripple across continents, destroy retirement funds, and trigger a recession. In moments like these, a country needs someone who understands global systems deeply enough to navigate storms. Someone who has led nations through crises before. Someone who won't add fuel to the fire with reckless statements. Someone like Mark Carney. Leadership determines whether chaos spreads or stability prevails, whether fear takes hold or clarity pushes forward. And as these events unfolded, the need for trusted leadership became clearer than ever. Tonight's story isn't just about a claim, a controversy, or a moment of misinformation. It's about what that moment revealed. Trump's statement about CUSMA wasn't just wrong, it was destabilizing. It ignited fear, disrupted markets, and created confusion across North America. It was a glimpse into what happens when leadership is loud but not informed, forceful but not thoughtful. Mark Carney represents the opposite. Where Trump throws sparks, Carney builds safeguards. Where Trump destabilizes alliances, Carney strengthens them. Where Trump invokes fear, Carney relies on facts. Canada now faces a defining question. In a world filled with hidden fires, global conflicts, economic bubbles, and political instability, Who do you trust to guide the future? A figure who thrives on chaos, or a leader who understands how to prevent it? If you believe in stability, clarity, competence, and a stronger future for Canada, stay informed, stay engaged, and continue to support voices that highlight truth over theatrics. The story of North America's future is unfolding quickly, and the choices we make now will shape what comes next.